David was the quintessential go-getter. Born to a family of doctors, he overachieved throughout his childhood. Straight A's, captain of his soccer team, editor of his high school newspaper. It was no surprise when he was accepted to Harvard, nor was it altogether surprising when David, like many of his peers in the early 2000s, eschewed law school and medical school to start his own business. After 10 years of patience and diligence, David had it all: a beautiful home, an adoring spouse, 3 flourishing children, and a $50 million check in hand for the company he had created back in 2002. Having spent nearly 2 weeks negotiating the sale of his company, verifying the funds, updating his will and trusts, David checked into the Whitby Hotel for a well-deserved break. There, he spent the next 48 hours trying to figure out how he could commit suicide while ensuring his family would still receive his life insurance benefit. So what happened? What brought the man who had it all so close to leaving it all behind? As it turns out, David didn't have it all. Something was missing from this life defined by success after success, accolade upon accolade, achievement upon achievement upon achievement. For as David discovered, though achievements may bring us pride, even satisfaction, they fill our lives neither with happiness nor with meaning. Alone, they can feed our self-confidence, but they cannot nourish our souls. For that, we require connection. Connection to the world, connection to one another, connection to the source of connection. These connections fill our lives with meaning and joy. The 20th century Jewish philosopher Martin Buber calls these connections I-thou relationships, suggesting that we create spiritual connections when we enter into genuine relationships characterized by curiosity, compassion, and transparency. When we open ourselves completely to the possibility of discovery, and in turn, to being discovered. But when we enter into relationship through need or through desire, when we seek out God or one another in order to fulfill a purpose, then our relationship becomes what Buber calls an I-it relationship, because we have effectively transformed someone else into an object. These too are important relationships. Sometimes we just need our kids to clean their rooms. Sometimes we just need our parents to take better care of themselves. Sometimes we just need God to answer our prayers. And that's okay. We just need to remember that when we use someone else to meet our needs or to achieve our goals, we're not creating connection. And as David sat in his room at the Whitby, he recognized that his was a life of goals achieved, of milestones conquered. He had invested his entire being into the pursuit of a dream. And now that his dream was fulfilled, he felt empty inside because he had no connection. So how does one begin to create connection? For those of us who have spent our lives connected, that may seem like a silly question. But for David, this question was not only substantive, it was the most important question of his life. Thankfully, this week's Torah portion, Trumah, provides the beginnings of an answer. God tells Moses to ask the Israelites for gifts: gold, silver, copper, linen, precious metals, animal skins, and more, to fashion a mikdash, a sanctuary, that God might dwell among them. The sages were not so comfortable with the idea that God requires a sanctuary in order to dwell among us. And so they taught that the building wasn't as important as the gifts themselves. Only by giving up something precious do the Israelites make it possible for God's presence to coexist with them. For our biblical ancestors, these precious gifts included some manner of donation from their accumulated wealth which otherwise could be used to obtain a home, food, clothing, safety, even a match for their child. Investing this precious resource into their spiritual life without any expectation of return is what made their relationship with God possible. And though we Americans may often appear preoccupied by our pursuit of wealth, the currency of our spiritual journey cannot be measured in gold or in silver or in precious stones. No, the gift we must pledge if we wish to enter into relationship with the divine is the scarcest, most precious resource at our disposal: our time. If we want connection with our children, we must spend time with our children. If we want connection with our community, we must spend time with our community. If we want connection with the natural world, we must spend time in nature. If we want connection with God, we must spend time with God. Not searching for something, not looking for something, not waiting for something. We must spend our time willingly, without expectation of return on our investment. And in a world in which everybody is so busy, a world in which no one seems to have any time, that might be the biggest ask of all. But at the end of the day, we either choose to make the time, or we go through our life without making those connections. But when we do, when we spend that time, when we pledge our most precious gift, then the moments of our lives become sanctuaries, with God sitting right beside us as we hold our loved ones' hands, as we listen in anticipation to their stories, as we study and discover and pray together, as we fill our lives with meaning and connection. Thankfully, David made it home from the Whitby. He didn't have a plan for moving forward, but he knew that his salvation lay in trusting his wife and his children. And so he shared his sense of emptiness with them. And then he listened. And he never stopped listening. And with enough listening, he discovered how to connect, first with his loved ones, then with his community, then with the world around him, and with something greater. It's not perfect. After all, you can't rebuild 10 years of absence overnight. But David's alive, and he's connecting because he's making the time to connect. On this Shabbat, I can only pray that we find that it is within our power to make the time for the absolutely important process of connection. Shabbat Shalom.